Hey there, it's Nat. Just been out for a walk and I've been thinking about processing stuff on my walk today and thought I'd record a few thoughts on that. Have you ever noticed, do you have a friend who's a bit of a crusader in terms of dealing with their stuff and particularly in the realm of personal development, when you know something's there, it's like no shadow unconquered, right? We all want to own our stuff because we don't want it to be running our work necessarily, because clients hide in our shadows, and there's all kinds of reasons that we be absolute crusaders in terms of owning our stuff, right? Maybe it's you. Like me, I'm one of those people who likes to own her stuff, and I'm a bit of a crusader with owning it. I'll over own it. I'll even own yours if you're not careful. There's something else not to do as well. But I just wanted to share a few thoughts on processing in healthy ways, because I feel like that's really important, right? I think especially for women, because we put a lot of weight on our ability to be quite proficient at processing our stuff and being able to go into the depths and not running from our stuff in that respect, right? But there's also a thing that you can go kind of too far into it and kind of end up potentially drowning in the depths and burning yourself out in the process. So I like to think of it a little bit like the process of being a human and diving, right? Going, whether it's you're snorkeling or whether it's you're actually rigged up to go for a deep sea dive, it's a little bit like that, right? Humans, as we stand at the moment, don't have the capacity to breathe underwater for long periods of time. This is just how we are at this point. We need to take a supply of air down with us, a deep breath, or we need to take a tank of air down there, right? Because in our present form, we're not evolved to survive down there for long periods of time. We have to come back up to the surface. We're evolved to live near the surface or to operate on the surface, but we're not so good at living under the surface unless we can create an environment under there that's suitable for us to breathe, right? And it's a little bit like processing our stuff is very similar to that, because while it's entirely necessary, it can, if you think about it like in terms of this is terrible, right? But I think about torture at the same time, because sometimes when you confront your trauma, it's not exactly light territory and it doesn't feel good, does it? I mean, to feel all of your anger, to feel all of your deepest pain about some of the most painful things that happen to us ever is intense. And while you can develop some degree of tolerance to, the more that you deal with stress, whether it's in your work or whether it's through life just having been through a lot of shit, like, yes, we can develop a certain tolerance and resilience in coping with that, but it still puts a degree of stress on the body and your body's biochemistry, right? Because a lot of the time it has you running on adrenaline mode, and even worse at the very end of that, when you've been doing that for a while, like you end up running on cortisol mode and on backup batteries, but like running a car and running it down and down and down without stopping for a service every now and then, yeah? So that's the risk of when we spend an excessive amount of time processing our stuff, trying to get to the bottom of it all. Like, there's that risk that you're literally going to physically hurt yourself because you put yourself in a state of burnout, really. And that can be tricky. I was thinking about this morning, one of my favourite TV shows over the last several years is Stargate SG-1. And there was like this perfect example of, there was this episode where they had this virtual reality machine. And one of the main characters, Teal'c, in it, who's an alien who comes and joins the military team from Earth, he's going to test it, yeah? And he's this guy who's been at war in his race for 1,000,000 years with this enemy that's the enemy of Earth, that's everybody's enemy because they enslave humans, yeah? And so this virtual reality game gives you a chance to actually play with various scenarios, but also like confront your weaknesses. They're thinking of using it as like a training tool, right? So he is being set up there in a simulation to improve his like warrior skills, yeah? The only thing is the game learns from you every second. So what ends up happening is he ends up playing in this scenario and it starts learning from him, and it also starts learning about his biggest weaknesses. as well as his greatest strengths. So there's part of him that believes that this intergalactic war with this other alien race, there's part of him fears that it will never be won. And there's also a part of him that feels that he's not adequate to actually end it, right? So what ends up happening is that rather than him coming back out of the game, he ends up getting stuck in like repeat over and over again, having to reset and start the scenarios again, because he keeps getting killed every single time, and then he keeps having to restart because he's created a scenario that he can't win, so he's just stuck in a loop, right? Meanwhile, on the outside, they're able to monitor his body and his physiology and his heart rate and exactly what his body's going through the whole time. And literally his body's under more and more stress. Like, he gets to the point in the end where his heart actually stops, and he's got the medical team there jabbing him with adrenaline, like trying to like restart his heart and all this stuff. Meanwhile, they've got someone else on the team who goes in, who they set it up so as he has a bit of a loop in the system that he can see ahead of time what's going to happen, and then he becomes a bit like in my diving metaphor, he becomes the guy that reminds you that when you're underwater and you're diving down in the stuff, like he points to number one, your oxygen supply for you, and gives you a little reminder under the water, and then points up to the surfaces up there, right? Because like Teal'c got lost in his own scenario in the depths at the bottom of the ocean. Here's me combining a story and a metaphor into one, right? So what's the point? Number one, like I was saying, physicality wise, it really stresses out your body. Potentially, if you don't give yourself a break from that, nobody can run on crisis mode forever without coming back out of there, right? So we need to remember that it's like that. And in military scenarios, there's a reason why torture is torture, because it's inflicting this stuff upon you that causes you massive amounts of stress that people find unpleasant, right? So we're going to remember that there's an element about processing our stuff that can be incredibly hard and stressful on your body. But then, like I was saying, it can become very disorientating down under the water, down there. It can get murky, right? It can get murky, and you can lose your sense if you something knocks you, say like you run into like maybe a dolphin or a seal or a shark goes past you underneath, and then all of a sudden you freak out and you lose your sense of where's everything, where is everything. Maybe you hit a little undercurrent somewhere that you get rolled, and now you're like, I don't know which way's up, like at the bottom of the wave. And so like we need to remember that there's also a pathway out of there, right? We need to be able to maintain some degree of perspective and clarity about how to get back out. So that's important. So it can be important to have someone with us or guiding that process, or at least we need to remember that there is an element of processing your stuff where you can kind of get a bit stuck down there, and every now and then we need to remind ourselves, dude, how much oxygen have you got left, and is it maybe time to like head back to the surface? So that was pretty much my thought for the day. It's actually just started, it's intermittent little showers over here, which I have no problem with rain. Actually, like I love a good walk in a little bit of a shower, but for the sake of that, I'm gonna wrap up this video now and go sit under a rock for a bit before I go meet someone for coffee shortly. But yeah, I just thought I'd share that little scenario with you, and yeah, love to hear your thoughts. Love to hear your thoughts on, have you experienced this? What's your experience of this? Of you processing, over-processing, under-processing, over-processing, and or finding your way to the surface? Love to hear. That's it from me. Until next time, have fun, take care, big love to you. Bye.